rites of passage. It means it's a journey itself, okay? And it's a reflection on a qualitative journey, meaning that I'm going to share with you all the things that I have done during my time doing the work qualitatively, and hopefully be able to entice you, or maybe to excite you, or to give you more knowledge on what qualitative is all about. And why do I use the word rites to a passage? Normally when we say about rites to a passage, they talk about all those rituals, you know, religious rituals. But for me, it's not about that. It's about making a new phase in your life. Imagine that you are venturing into qualitative field. So as a researcher, your thinking will be constantly evolving, meaning that people will start to think differently from any other kind of research, be it in the quantitative manner, and your qual research will transform yourself, and you somehow will see there are changes that is happening to you, that are happening to you without you knowing it, without you controlling it. At the end of the day, hopefully, as a qual researcher, throughout your passage, excuse me, you become a true qual researcher that listens to those who wanted to be heard, uplift the unsung heroes, and hopefully highlights the complexity and the intricacy of life that never been dealt before. So any other kind of research, the first thing that we have to pin in is the research philosophy. What is research philosophy? Research philosophy deals with the source, the nature, and the development of knowledge. What do you want to inquire? It is researchers' awareness in formulating beliefs and assumptions in the research. So you have to check what kind of philosophy do you have, or what kind of research philosophy that you want to look into your research. And it will reflect the researcher's important assumption which serve as the basis of the research strategy. There are 4 main research philosophies. So if you want to do qualitative research, you have to know where you are, okay? Generally, there are 4. The first one is pragmatism, okay? Pragmatism, we are going to look into each one of the category. The second one will be the positivism, and this is where the majority of the research students are focusing into. They are using surveys, questionnaires. Realism, and last but not least, interpretivism or interpretivists. What are these? Okay, research paradigm is a set of common beliefs and agreements shared between scientists about how problems should be understood and addressed. And this is by Kuhn. And according to Guba, in order for you to understand what research paradigms and what other philosophies, you have to ask these 3 questions. Okay, in terms of ontology, what is reality to you? For quantitative person, reality can be measured, or reality can be deducted into several things only. But for qualitative, reality is something that is very subjective in manner. You cannot define things as simple as factor A, factor B, or you can measure things between all those 5 Likert scale or 7 Likert scale whatsoever. And then you have to ask about how you get to know things, the epistemology. How do you know something? And how are you going to get the information? So the methodology, ontology, and epistemology will talk about what the research paradigm is all about. And again, when we look at pragmatism, all these 4 quadrants of research philosophies, pragmatism means mixed method. So quantitative and qualitative blend. Okay. But again, you have to be careful, because if you do survey and qual, not necessarily you fall under pragmatism. I can say like like sciences people, like engineering, science, biology, they fall under this. Okay. Positivism, highly structured, large sample measurement, quantitative in nature, but you can also mix with some bits of qualitative. Realism, this particular method can only fit into the nature of the study. Let's say, if you want to ask about the design of cars, for example, you cannot do surveys only. Maybe you want to do some flashcards, in-depth interviews or a session, one-to-one session with clients who like a particular kind of unique design of cars. So you may want to get those kind of clients to talk about what are the features that they like about cars, okay? What kind of, spec that they are looking at? What are the kind of shapes of the lamps or the lights or the bumper or the screen, etc. So it depends on what method that you want to look into, which is fall under realism, then the methods will come in. And last but not least, the interpretivism and interpretivist. This deal with small sample size, very in-depth interviews or very in-depth investigation, and these fall into the qualitative nature. In doing qualitative research, we also do with qualitative research sampling, but we don't have that many. There are only 3. Okay, so if you want to do qualitative research, make sure that you know which technique that you want to use. The first one will be purposive sampling. Because our sample size is very tiny, our investigation is very deep. So what we want is to make sure that we get the person that we think best to explain. So we purposely handpick it. Okay, like when you go to buffet setting, eating food, and then you handpick which dessert that you want to eat. So just like qualitative research, you handpick the person that you want to interview, or you want them to be in your research. So purposive sampling is contradicting 360 degrees with quantitative, because according to quantitative person, if you handpick them, they are bound to have biases. It's okay for qualitative, but not okay for quant. Why? Because we don't deal with bigger sample size. So we want the person that we approach definitely be able to talk about the topic that we want to investigate, or else it will be waste of time. So by selecting them, you are purposely picking them for the right purpose. Okay, so purposive sampling is one of the method. The second one will be snowball. The name is snowballing. So when you want to make like snowman, you have to start off with a small ball that you use, you hand cup it, and then you have to roll it over the snow surface in order to make sure that the ball becomes bigger and rounder. So snowballing means that you start off with a very small number of people that you know, maybe 1 or maybe 2. And then this particular 1 or this particular 2 will recommend you who should be next to be interviewed. Why is it so? Because you do not have any idea, nor any information on who are the expert or who are those people in your topic. Last but not least will be quota sampling. So you select the case within several different subgroups that represent the overall, situation or the overall context. Okay, these are the strategies that you may want to consider to collect your data. What are the techniques that can be used? One thing is focus group. In-depth interviews, one-to-one. Okay, if we have time later, or I will ask you to look at some of the recordings of Oprah in-depth interviews, okay, with the writers, Rowling, J.K. Rowling, the Harry Potter writer, okay. And this is participation observations, okay. Observations is very good, you observe, but there are 2 kinds of observation. One that is non-participative observation, another one will be participation observation. So look at this one. These are the, it is like a kind of like a ceremony of a tribe, okay. And this guy wearing white is definitely not a tribe, doesn't belong to the tribe, doesn't look like a tribe, but he's holding the instrument, the musical instrument, just like the guy next to him, okay. So what he did is to participate in playing the instrument. Another part that I talked about will be the non-participation observation, where you cannot be that close to the subject matter. So by observing on your own, there are high biases that you only want to report the things that you think that can support your findings, or the thing that you think can explain better in your term, and ignore the rest of the thing. Another tools that you can use would be research diaries. Another students of mine, Dr. Helen Hollywood, Tan Siu Hong, used research diaries when she did competence acquisition of senior women managers. You can also use props and images, especially with kids. If if you're working with like toddlers, like 4 years old, 3 years old, nothing much can be said. You ask things, they will answer you, or they don't answer you, they will ignore you. But if you have puppets, if you have like toys, storybooks, maybe you can capture some of their feelings by using all these props, audio and video recordings. This is what you call it, like the participant doesn't know that they've been watched. So you can see the overall picture, and then the room is being equipped with mics, so you can hear every bits of it, and then you can just record your observation, and some of your findings from the mics that has been recorded, the recordings. Quiet so that life may speak. This is what qualitative analysis is all about. Having a very good hearing skill helps you to listen to the words said by your respondents, and hopefully can trigger you or can give you a quick response of asking probing questions. A lot of time when you ask questions, in-depth interviews, for example, you read those questions as if it's a script. And when you read your questions, you don't sound that natural. So it's quite okay for interview 1 and 2. Hopefully by interview 3, you are more familiar with your questions, that you tend to get very relaxed. Again, who you are and how you present yourself to your interviewee will affect the answers given. So qualitative data are very subjective, all words. So no numbers except number of interviews, how many, number of case study, how many, and that's it. Rich, very in-depth information, and normally form of words. It can be a diagram, it can be images as well. The most common form of qualitative data are derived from semi-structured or unstructured interviews, open interviews, although other sources can include observation. We have talked about it. So the data that we want to analyze will be the field work, field notes, life histories. It means when people talk about someone that is very, very famous, so we may want to listen to the recollections of stories from other people, but those other people must be someone that is being known for its recognition. You cannot simply talk to strangers and ask them about, can you share with me, what do you think about maybe Brad Pitt? So now there are challenges when it comes to analyzing qualitative data. One of it is sampling related problems, because we only deal with very, very tiny, relatively small sample size compared to the quantitative studies. So you have to work within the limited sampling size. As I said, in qualitative data technique, there's no magic number or as to how many to be in to do the interview, how many cases, whatever, except for one method, that is phenomenography, that says minimum 6, maximum 10. The rest doesn't say nor indicate how many you should interview. Another thing would be the sampling biases, because, as I told you, we do purposive sampling. But again, in qualitative, it is allowable because we do not have the time nor the provision of scope to interview more than certain number of people. Like cannot interview hundreds. We can survey hundreds but not interview hundreds. So for that, issues on that, but you have to explain it. It is allowable for qualitative. The idea is that those who are being purposely selected will be the one who is knowledgeable on this subject matter, Observation biases, as I said, some people like when they know that they're being observed, so they act upon it. So they're being very good, they talk not in a normal manner, so they feel very, and some of them thinks that your observation gives hopes to their, their worrisome. So that can be something that you have to deal with later on. And then, as I said, when people act up, so whatever that you observe can be an artificial scenario. Okay, that's why we encourage observation, regardless whether it is participative, whether it is non-participative. It must be done more than one time. It must be done in a very, different time frame, so that it gives you some idea in terms of consistency or reliability of the findings of the observation. Analysis, again, because we are doing thematic analysis or graded theory analysis, or phenomenography analysis, so it is very inductive. So it's not, we cannot use like the quantitative person that is driven by the variables which they get from a certain theory that is fixed for the study. Okay, so you cannot do coding or themes, identify themes based on variables or based on writings of others. You cannot go to the field asking questions as if you've been driven by the theories that you have read through. So your questions are very biasly led to the theories, whereby here in qualitative nature, we are being inductive. We are allowing data to speak by itself. So if you start to frame your questions on certain area, you are being quantitative in a qualitative nature. Okay. Writing of findings also, there's some challenge. You have to be flexible, okay, and being reflective, meaning that, because you are part of the tool. If you are a good interviewer, inshallah your data will be good. Okay. If you are not a people person, definitely you will have a very, very, boring data. So for that, you are not being able to reflect well on asking questions or respond well on the answers given by the interviewees. So for that reason, when you want to write your findings, you will have a lot of problems, because your data is not rich. Your data is not really, explain the things that you think should be there. Okay. Discussion. Again, what you want to discuss always being questions, because are you discussing based on findings, or are you just discussing it for the sake of discussing it? So there's an issue of integrity and context. That's why I said, if you increase the number, or if you have more than one technique in qualitative, that gives you somehow a checkpoint of checking the different sources to see whether these particular themes or issues are parallel among or contradict. And if it's contradicting, you are able to answer why. So there are three types of qualitative analysis, okay? The narration part, the easiest. I think narrative can be given to undergraduates, okay? The thematic analysis, qualitative content analysis is quite common, okay, the most popular among qualitative researchers. And the one that I did for my PhD will be grounded theory analysis, but I don't put another one that is phenomenography. Because if you want to talk about phenomenography as if that we are talking about SEM, structured equation modeling is high end. Okay. Is first, you have to make duplicate copies of your recorded interviews. WAV or audio files are easily corrupted. Okay, so for that, I want you to burn your CDs. I know burning a CD is a very 70s, but we have to, because CDs are the most, reliable. Even your hard disk can be corrupted as well. Second, you start to do filing. Okay, so buy an accordion file, file that has a lot of sleeves in it. That helps you to, then you put the name of your respondent, etc., label it nicely, and then you start to organize. Because if you have different data coming from observation, in-depth interviews, focus groups, so that pockets help to segregate. Okay. And then I would advise you to transcribe with the most interesting interview first. Why? Because people, not everyone likes to be interviewed. Some can give you very boring answers. So I would advise you to motivate you to do the transcribing. Go with the one that is the most fun, the most interesting, because you are there interviewing them. And then you have to transcribe verbatimly, means words by words being uttered. Okay, not the So the and the non-vowel sound you have to ignore. And then later you start to compare, because you have a multiple data sources. So you start to compare your interview transcript after reading it through with your field note after reading it through, and then with the observation maybe, or whatever methods that you use, or focus group or written exercise after you have read through, and then start to thinking and linking. Okay, so imagine that you play with puzzles. Okay, so this is the time for you to make the aha moment. Oh, now I know why they say about this. Over here, they also mention about this. You say, okay, this is very strongly supported. And they also show me this, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so this one is a very interesting issue. Or you can say, these particular themes is well supported by 3 different sources of data.